Well, I mean, if we do this enough, we'll have some clips in here that might work out. We'll just chop it
We'll
up,
just
chop it and print it, chop it and print it.
chop suey.
No,
System of a Down.
that's metal.
Welcome to a podcast about metal music.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 1 of Arsenic and Espresso. I'm Alice Arsenic.
And I'm Josh. Is that it? I feel like I need more than that.
And I'm Josh.
And I'm just Josh. I'm not Jake from State Farm, that's for sure. Anyways, though, I'm excited to get this going. How do you start this? Episode 1.
I mean, we could just jump right in.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So we are wanting to bring a little bit more representation of the metal scene to the forefront of podcasts everywhere. YouTube, maybe other platforms. Who knows? But
All
we
of them.
both feel like metal music is seriously like underrepresented.
No, looking through a lot of the YouTube, sort of genre podcasts. Obviously, there's a ton that goes on with like hip hop, and even in like the pop culture, or even in sort of the rock sphere. But I don't think there's a whole lot going on with just metal music in general. And I think one thing with metal music as well is that the genres are so subdivided. It's kind of polarizing, right?
It's very polarizing. And a lot of people get really mad if you're like, oh, I like this kind of metal. And they're like, you've never heard of industrial underground black pagan nerd metal? And you're like,
Right.
no, I haven't. They're like, then you don't like metal.
Exactly. No, and I think that's kind of an interesting take that we have on it, right? Is we kind of like all metal.
Yeah.
I think, for me,
You like all metal.
I definitely like all metal.
I have a very specific taste.
But I mean, I prefer sort of the hardcore genres, right? Sort of like the metalcore, the deathcore, that sort of stuff. But I do enjoy it all. But then you have sort of I don't know. I guess you would find
Niche.
the niche, right?
Yeah.
Of the of like that gothic metal, or the even just the classics, going back to like heavy metal and things like that. That's something that you really
Yeah.
enjoy.
I love anything that has like a Nordic pagan black metal sound. I love stuff that also has classical instruments. I love anything with pianos or string instruments of any kind, wind instruments. I love it. I love anything inspired by like classical music, along with like really heavy, dirty vocals. That's my jam.
And I think that there's a spot for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I envisioned going into this podcast was something that everybody from every genre can kind of listen to and get something out of.
Mhm.
I mean, of course, you can't please everybody, right? That's not what this is supposed to be. But just sort of a space to kind of build up the genre as well. I feel like over
And
the
to
last...
experience new genres.
Oh, absolutely.
Because like as someone who is a creature of habit and only listens to the same like 10 bands and the same like
That's
4
right.
albums by those 10 bands. Okay, 6 bands.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I'm stuck in a rut with music all the time, and I will truly listen to an album for like years without even listening to something else by that same band.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that I'm hoping to get out of it too. Coming from a position where I kind of shut myself off from a whole lot of music over the last, like, I would say 7 years or so, as I went into business for myself, and I just had to, I turned my car into a sort of a school, right? An audio school. And so I didn't listen to any new music for almost the last 7 years. And so it wasn't until recently that I started getting really back into metal and exploring some of the other, subgenres.
Sub genres.
No, subgenres and finding these bands, because I mean the last 7 years has been really good
Hmm.
for metal music, and so really getting back in and diving in and just exploring some of the bands as well, and that's something that I want to see, um, from recommendations and things, whether it's on our Twitter or in the YouTube comments or things like that. Some of the stuff that maybe we've missed out on that we need to explore.
Or those random, like, really underground bands that deserve a lot more recognition than they're getting. I would love to learn more about all of it. Like, as much as I love metal and I love heavy metal and rock and roll and death metal, and I still don't know a lot about it. Um, I feel like where I started in the metal world was in a very, like, unique place.
Yeah,
I started listening to metal in like 2001, 2002, and I grew up very conservative Southern Baptist. And up until like the 2000s, I had really never heard anything super, super heavy. Skillet was probably the heaviest music I had ever listened
right,
to. My parents both listened to like glam rock and like 80s hair bands.
right.
Um, my dad listened to more 80s hair bands. My mom was very much like Led Zeppelin and Queen, and I can't even think of anyone else she listens to. But
Well, and your dad played music too, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. My
and
dad was in the 80s, he was in like a hair metal band. And then through my childhood, he was in like Christian rock bands um, for as long as I can remember. And so I was exposed to like rock and roll, but not metal until I was like 11 or 12.
yeah, I'd say it's really similar to myself as well. I think growing up in the church, it was one of those things where there were certain bands that you listened to, but we always heard of metal as devil's music, right?
Hmm.
So I mean that was sort of something that was shut off. But then I mean in the 2000s, like a lot of you guys know, that's really when like the Christian core started to come into effect, where you had bands like As They Lay Dying and I mean Haste the Day, right? Under Oath, all those bands that are loved throughout the community anyways from what they've brought to it. And it was cool to hear that, right? I think one of the first metal bands that I ever heard was Demon Hunter.
Demon Hunter was
And
definitely the first I heard
yeah, and it
ever.
was and it was cool to see. I mean, it was shocking, right?
Yeah.
It was like, wait, I'm allowed to listen to this,
I,
as
I, ca- I can remember the first, like, the actual first moment hearing Demon Hunter. It was their song Infected on I think it was like the X 2000
oh
something
yeah,
CD, the mixed CDs that the
oh man,
Christian community put out to compete with the Now That's Music CDs. Um, and like 8 songs into the second album, which was always the heavier album on the 2 pack, like 8 songs in was Infected by Demon Hunter. And I was driving late at night with my dad, and I had my headphones on, and that song came on, and I can just remember being absolutely shell shocked
right.
at what I was hearing. And I listened to
It blew
that
me away
song
for sure.
on repeat for months.
Yeah.
And so began my uh like trajectory of not deviating from any music ever.
No, I think and that was one album that I definitely put on repeat for a long time. I
I
didn't
didn't even
really.
listen to the rest of the album till after you and I started dating.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
So
it was.
like 6 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that was really where everything started with it. It was exciting too to be able to put on something, especially with the heavier sound, right?
Mhm.
And then I thought it was a whole lot of fun. Rebels Without a Cause, right? I'd be
Mhm.
jamming some like Mudvayne, right, in the car, but my mom didn't know what the lyrics were. She didn't understand it,
Mhm.
so she had no idea. So that was sort of my rebellious phase of that, and that's just always been something that I've loved about metal music, right? Is
Yeah.
it something that I can just enjoy and I can blast, just really get into.
I did always like the looks I got from other people. Like when I started driving and I would have music playing super loud in my car and people would look at me, they'd be like, ugh, because my
Yeah.
music was so loud and so heavy. But I remember one of the first times I drove in your car with you. We were probably like 15, and I think you probably had Mudvayne or like Lamb of God or something playing. And
Yeah.
again, I had never heard anything like that, but I wanted you to think I was cool. So I was like, yeah, like I know this.
Yeah.
But I'd never listened to it before, and it was like you got me into that like heavy.
Yeah. I think, man, I just had a couple of friends that, I'd stay over at their house and they always had something new, right?
Mhm.
And one of them had the Demon Hunter CD, and that's what really got me into it. Um, it's just so unexpected. I had, at that point in time, I had never heard anything before because my house was so sheltered. What I grew up in
Mhm.
was just so sheltered. I've never heard anything harder than that, than what you would hear on a country music station or something like that.
Is that what your
Um,
family listened to? Like if it wasn't the Christian radio station, was it country
was
songs?
yeah, country songs,
That's so
which is
weird.
ridiculous
That's so
because
weird.
I think probably country lyrics are worse than
Way more explicit because you can also
most lyrics out
understand
there.
them.
Yeah, no, it's true. So I don't know. I think something that I really want to see happen, like we talked about, is just exploring music that we've missed out on and really going through it.
Mhm.
And so I want to kind of explore more is just all the different bands that have come out, all the great music that has happened in the last 10 years or
Well,
so.
and even the great music we missed out on in the earlier portions of our childhood, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah, no, that's something that I want to explore more is the bands that we missed out on. There's so much out there.
There's so much
Um,
out there, and like we're wanting to be able to take recommendations like he was saying earlier. I think you said it earlier. It might have been in a different take. I honestly don't know.
that's
um
okay. There's been
but
a lot of
taking
those.
recommendations from our listeners about bands you guys love, and we're wanting to do everything from like reviewing bands, talking about like for example, we can just use like a classic band, like going like Black Sabbath and talking about like how the band formed and like their a bit of their discography and like where the band ended up and just the
Absolutely.
trajectory of their music, and then um also breaking down like who inspired these bands and like where they took a lot of their
Right.
inspiration from. I
History
would love to
behind
do
it.
lyric breakdowns because some metal music has like really
Oh yeah,
deep,
there's
super intense lyrics, and then there's other metal music that's just like,
just pig squeals.
well,
No.
pig squeals, or just like really like they're trying really hard to be hardcore,
Right.
and I that's very entertaining for me, and so I would love to be able to do stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously, as someone who listens to the same six bands over and over again, I would need recommendations of like who you would like to hear us break down.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. I mean, obviously doing some stuff on YouTube as well that's just strictly for YouTube. That would be different reactions, different music videos. There's some crazy music videos for metal bands out there.
Yeah.
And then something that I've really felt inspired to do as well, going back through the discographies of some of these bands that I've missed out on.
Hmm.
Right now, I'm really taking like a deep dive into the Acacia strain. And it's been cool to go from just their first album, their freshman album, to what they sound like now, and experience all that. The different band members that have been involved, their sound, sort of their inspirations, all that sort of stuff.
I feel like we have a pretty good idea of like where we want this podcast to go, of content we're going to be bringing you, and I'm super pumped.
I'm really excited about it. It's always sort of been a passion of ours to just talk about music. How many countless times have you recommended something or I've recommended something back, and we just spend 2 hours talking about what makes that band great, why we
Yeah.
like listening to it. And so hopefully you guys really dig it. Hopefully you really enjoy it. And feel free to give us comments or follow us on Twitter. Send us some stuff on Twitter.
What is our Twitter that
Oh,
they would
our
follow?
Twitter is going to be Arsenic Podcast. At Arsenic Podcast, because Arsenic and Espresso Podcast was too long. But everything else is Arsenic and Espresso Podcast.
Okay, so everything else is Instagram.
Yep. Instagram, YouTube, the whole deal. Yep. I think this is the outro moment, right? To go follow us.
Subscribe.
And smash the like button if you're new to this too.
if
Yeah.
you're new to this too. If you've never done this
Hit
before,
the bell.
thumbs up.
I'm sure our son could probably do a better outro than us, but that's
Probably.
okay. See you next time.
It's all uphill or downhill?
I mean, it could be either one. It could be downhill from here, I think.
Is downhill better?
Downhill's worse.
All uphill from
It's
here.
all uphill. Yeah.
Bye.